Hi, I'm Kaelen. When my daughter needed emergency surgery, I didn't ask for much. Just a ride, a signature, a voice to say, "She matters." But my parents refused. My sister, Vera, laughed, said, "You're always a mess, Kaelen. A loser mom, just looking for handouts." I thought that was the worst part, but I was wrong. The worst part? They didn't just abandon me. They erased me, quietly, expertly, right out of the family picture. But how far would they go to keep their perfect image intact? And how do you fight back when you're already written out? I don't remember what time it was, but I do remember the sound. It wasn't a loud crash or a scream. It was the softest sound in the world, my daughter's body hitting the floor. I had just turned off the burner and was setting a spoon on the counter when I heard it. The clatter of metal against tile, the brief gasp, then silence. I turned around, and there was Emrin, crumpled, knees buckled, her face ghost white. I ran to her, the pot still boiling behind me. Her forehead was burning up, skin flushed but clammy. She mumbled my name, barely audible. I scooped her into my arms, fingers trembling as I reached for my phone with my free hand. 3% battery, no charger in sight. We were alone, just me, her, and the cold kitchen light that made everything feel worse. I grabbed the keys, a blanket, my wallet. Forgot shoes. I wasn't thinking. My only thought was, don't let anything happen to her. Not now. Not ever. The hospital wasn't far, but I knew the moment they asked for insurance verification or emergency contact, I'd need someone to speak for me. Someone who still had a shred of credibility in this town. I sat in the back of the Uber, holding Emrin, whispering to her, "You're okay, baby, I'm here." The driver kept glancing in the mirror, but didn't say much, bless him. I could feel her skin dampening my shirt, her breath shallow and uneven. I unlocked my phone. 2%. I called my mom first. It rang, then went to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Isolde. Leave a message if you must." I tried again. Nothing. I called my dad, straight to voicemail. Then, against all logic, I called Vera. My sister, the woman with perfectly filtered videos and reels about boundaries, toxic relatives, and protecting your peace. I knew what I was doing. I hated it, but I was desperate. She picked up on the third ring. "Kaelen?" Her voice was upbeat, like she was already filming. "Give me a sec, I'm live." "Vera, Emrin collapsed. She's burning up. I need help. Someone to call the hospital, maybe even just..." "Girl, again with the chaos?" Her voice didn't even lower. "I swear you're like a walking disaster movie. Maybe if you weren't such a loser mom, your life wouldn't always be on fire." I didn't get to respond. The phone died in my hand. We pulled up to the ER just as my battery went black. I carried Emrin inside, my legs heavier than they should have been. Once inside, the nurses moved fast. She was seen immediately. Words like fever spikes, possible infection, need blood work buzzed around me. I nodded through the questions, filled out papers with hands that didn't feel like mine. When they took her back for scans, I stood in the hallway, holding her small pink hoodie. I clutched it so tight, it nearly tore. A nurse approached, maybe in her 40s. Kind eyes. She didn't speak at first, just handed me a bottle of water. I nodded in thanks. "You alone?" she finally asked. I nodded. "Always." She didn't pity me. She just stood there for a second, then said, "She's stable for now. You should sit." I sat. The plastic seat felt like stone. My mind wasn't racing. It was eerily calm, not with sadness, not with anger, just clarity. I opened the hospital's guest Wi-Fi and let the device reconnect. My phone hadn't come back to life yet, but the lobby had a small community tablet dock. Out of instinct, I pulled up Instagram. Vera was trending again. This time, it was a live stream clip titled, "Toxic Family Will Drain You." I tapped play. There she was, hair done, lashes long, seated in her condo, saying, "Sometimes even your own sister can be your biggest failure. You can love someone and still know they're not your responsibility. The clip was time-stamped. It was recorded during my call. I stared at the screen. Not in shock, not in heartbreak, just a hollow confirmation. I wasn't the loser. I was the punchline. My hand went to my pocket, but I had nothing left to grab. No more calls to make. Instead, I reached for the nurse's pen on the counter and flipped over the back of an insurance brochure. I started writing a list. Not of people I needed, of people I'd never call again. It wasn't long, just 3 names. Underneath, I wrote, "This wasn't the worst night of my life. It was the start of something else entirely." The fluorescent lights in the waiting room had a way of draining the color from everything, including my thoughts. Emryn was stable now. They said her vitals had evened out, and the surgery prep had gone smoothly. She was resting, hooked up to machines that beeped in slow, steady rhythms. I had pulled a chair beside her hospital bed, but after a few hours of listening to the quiet, I stepped out into the corridor, needing air without leaving the building. It was early, the kind of early where the sun hadn't committed to rising yet, and the few people in the lobby moved in whispers. I sat down in a corner, curled into myself, phone plugged into the wall socket next to the vending machine. No missed calls, no texts, not from Vera, not from my mother, not even from the man who still legally called himself my father. I wasn't expecting a parade, but even pity would have been louder than this. Out of habit, I opened my social media. No notifications, but I saw a tag. A fundraiser post from an old friend I hadn't spoken to in over a year. She'd seen Emryn's condition through a mutual connection and had set up a donation page. It was a kind gesture, one I didn't ask for, but one I appreciated. Then I saw the comments. Buried under hundreds of supportive words was a blue checkmark comment from Vera. "I don't associate with people who drain others. Please remove this tag." Just like that. Like I was mold on her white couch. I felt the kind of anger that didn't shake or burn, it just anchored. I remembered helping her shoot her first YouTube video when she didn't know how to frame a shot or balance audio. I had stayed up past midnight stitching her script together with free software on my old laptop. She cried then, not because she was moved, but because she didn't like how her hair looked in the preview clip. She had forgotten that night, clearly. Or maybe she chose to. Because remembering would mean acknowledging I was part of the construction of her perfect life. It wasn't just that she refused to help me now. It was that she needed to deny I'd ever helped her at all. She didn't just abandon me. She erased me. A nurse approached with a clipboard and a small bouquet of flowers. "These just arrived," she said, handing them to me. "They're for Clarissa. Wait, no, sorry, wrong patient." I looked at the card. "Stay strong, Clarissa." "Mom and Dad." The nurse frowned, checking her tablet. "Ah, these were for room 204. You're 208. I'll get yours. Hang on." I handed them back, muttering something polite, then waited. Minutes later, a different nurse arrived, holding a new bouquet. Fewer flowers, different card. This one read, "Thinking of you. M and D." No names, no warmth, just initials, like a transaction. I didn't even open the envelope. I dropped the card into my bag and placed the flowers on the far side of Emryn's window, where she wouldn't see them when she woke. That wasn't a message of love. It was a receipt. The nurse who delivered them lingered for a moment longer. She was tall, sharp-eyed, kind, but professional. "Will your family be joining you later today?" she asked, tucking the blanket around Emryn's arm gently. I hesitated, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I hated saying it out loud. "They're busy people." She nodded once without judgment. "If you need a break, we have a family lounge down the hall. It's usually empty in the mornings." "Thanks," I said. As she walked away, I watched her back and wondered if she had seen this before, if she could clock the difference between someone waiting for support and someone who had stopped waiting altogether. I pulled out my phone again, not to scroll, not to search, but to list. I started cataloging things, not dramatic betrayals, just omissions. Small ways I had become invisible in my own life. No Christmas card last year, No invite to Vera's engagement party. A shared family photo posted online. My body cropped out on one side, only Emran's hair visible, half cut at the shoulder. It was like they were editing me out in slow motion. Maybe to them, it wasn't even cruel. Maybe it was just convenient. I thought I had lost their love. What I hadn't realized was that they were already rewriting who I was. By the third morning in the hospital, I stopped checking the time. The sky outside had gone from black to a dull gray blue, streaked with clouds that didn't commit to being either storm or sunshine. I sat beside Emran's bed, my body stiff from sleeping upright, my coat still wrapped around my shoulders. The chair had molded to my spine, like it had been carved to fit my fatigue. Emran was sleeping, her breathing slow, rhythmic, more peaceful than it had been in days. The IV bag swayed a little whenever a nurse passed too quickly, and I found myself watching it instead of blinking. I couldn't cry. Not anymore. I'd crossed that line sometime between the second silence from my mother and the wrong bouquet yesterday. So instead, I wrote, "Not out loud, not to anyone." I opened the Notes app on my phone and let my thumb hover over the screen for a moment before tapping the first letter. It started with, "In case something goes wrong." Then I paused. No, too dramatic. I backspaced. I started again. "Emran, I don't know when you'll read this, if ever, but I need you to know that loving you was the only thing I've never questioned." The words poured out faster than I expected. Some sentences were coherent, others fragmented, but each one felt like exhaling something I'd been holding in for too many years. I know I've made mistakes, not because I was weak, but because I thought if I endured enough, they'd eventually see us, value us. They didn't. I paused again, then added, "And that's not your fault." I wrote about the loneliness of raising her without a safety net, about how every time she coughed, I had to weigh whether it was serious enough to afford the copay, about how birthdays meant saving up for a secondhand cake that still made her smile like it was made of gold. I confessed a truth I'd never said aloud. I wasn't ashamed of being your mom. I was ashamed of how small they made me feel for being proud of it. Somewhere between memories and regrets, I typed one more line. "You saved me without even knowing. And if I don't make it through today, I need you to know. Being your mother was the best part of my story." I hit save, not send. It didn't feel like a message that belonged in her hands yet. I tucked the phone back into my pocket and closed my eyes. Just for a minute. When I woke up, the light in the room had shifted. Still early, but brighter. Emran was no longer asleep. She was curled against me, small arms wrapped tightly around my waist, cheek pressed into my ribs. "Hey, sweetheart," I whispered, brushing her hair from her forehead. She didn't answer, just nestled closer. I glanced down. My phone was resting on the bed, screen still lit, the note still open. I didn't ask, and she didn't say. There was nothing to explain. The weight of words already shared, even in silence, was enough. A soft knock came from the door. Nurse Jamie peeked in, holding a chart. "Morning," she said, voice gentle. "Just wanted to let you know surgery's scheduled for 2 hours from now. Everything looks stable, and the team's ready." I nodded. "Thank you." She looked at Emran, then at me. "She's a fighter." "She has to be," I replied. "Her mom is." Jamie smiled faintly and stepped back out, leaving the door slightly ajar. I leaned back, watching Emran's tiny fingers clutch the hem of my coat like it was an anchor. She didn't speak, but her presence filled every inch of the room. I didn't call anyone to let them know about the surgery, not because I forgot, because I knew better now. But what I didn't expect was the silence to get louder. It started with a clipboard. A woman in scrubs knocked gently on the frame of the door and said my name with a little too much caution. "Kaelen Whitmore?" I stood up instinctively. She gave me the same kind smile everyone in this hospital seemed to carry. But there was a wrinkle in her brow she didn't bother hiding. "We need to talk about insurance," she said. Of course we do. She walked me to a small administrative alcove outside the ICU, away from the buzz of machines and away from Emran. I sat in the hard plastic chair across from her as she tapped into a system I couldn't see. There's a discrepancy in Emran's coverage, she began, professional but not cold. The system indicates she's no longer active under the family policy. I blinked. That's impossible. The last update in the system was made 4 months ago. Someone filed a removal under shared authority. It was signed digitally, under an email account tied to Vera Langley. It was as if the oxygen left the room, quietly. I stared at the floor. My sister handled insurance for the family when Mom delegated it. The woman didn't respond. She didn't need to. They didn't just forget my daughter. They removed her on paper, made her invisible. I asked for the timestamp, asked to print a copy. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. But my hands shook as I folded the paper and slid it into my bag. I didn't even ask if I'd have to pay out of pocket. I already knew the answer. Back in Emran's room, Nurse Jamie was adjusting her chart when she glanced at me. Something in my face must have given it away. She didn't ask, not at first. When she finished rechecking Emran's IV line, she said softly, "Want me to call someone? Maybe someone from billing or case management to walk you through it?" "They're the ones who filed it," I said, the words bitter in my throat. Jamie nodded, silent. Her hand hovered over my shoulder for a second, then withdrew. Not because she didn't care, but because there are things even kindness can't reach. Later, as Emran stirred awake, she looked up at me with those wide, clear eyes that hadn't yet learned what people are capable of when comfort is more important to them than connection. "Mom? Yeah, sweetheart? Does Grandma hate me?" It hit harder than the insurance call. I froze. For a second too long. "No," I said finally. My voice sounded even to my ears, but I felt the fault line cracking behind it. But sometimes, people only love the version of you they want to see, not the real you. Emran blinked. Then why doesn't she want to see me at all? I couldn't answer. Not truthfully, not kindly. Not without shattering the last fragile thread that kept my daughter from knowing just how disposable we were to the people who shared our blood. So I said nothing. Instead, I pulled the blanket higher around her and smoothed her hair like it was all I knew how to do. She turned her face into my arm, a small, tired gesture of trust I didn't deserve but still clung to. When she drifted off again, I stepped outside the room. I dialed Vera. It rang twice, then went straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I opened my phone's notes app and added a new page beneath the last list. This one I titled, "Things They Took From Me Without Asking." I wrote, my daughter's insurance, her right to be protected, her place in their legacy, the part of me that believed silence was safety. I looked out the window, past the parking lot where the sky was dull and clouded. The wind pushed against the trees, but didn't break them. "If you think I'll stay quiet after this," I said aloud to no one, "you've mistaken endurance for acceptance." I wasn't broken, I was unfinished. And unfinished women write dangerous endings. They were just about to wheel Emran through the double doors when it happened. A woman in navy scrubs intercepted the gurney, her face tight with hesitation. She looked from the chart in her hands to me, then back to the anesthesiologist standing at Emran's side. "I'm sorry, we need to hold the procedure," she said, directing her voice to the attending. I took one step forward. "What are you talking about?" "There's a financial flag on her account," she said carefully. "A complaint was submitted regarding insurance eligibility. We've been instructed to pause until it's resolved." The words didn't register at first. Then they did, all at once. "You're delaying her surgery," I said, each word sharp, clipped. "Because someone filed a dispute?" She nodded, avoiding my eyes. "Who?" I demanded. She opened her tablet. "It says the request came from a contact within the policy network, family access level." I didn't need to ask twice. I already knew who had done it. Vera. They hadn't just left me to fend for myself. They had actively tried to stop my daughter from being saved. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't scream. I simply stepped aside, pulled out my phone, and opened my camera. "Let me see the form," I said. She hesitated. "I'm not asking. I'm documenting." She handed it over. I took a photo of the submission ID, the complaint number, the notation. Concern over fraudulent dependency listing. Request for verification. My hands were steady, my voice calmer than I thought possible. "Now get me someone from legal," I said. "I need documentation, not apologies." It took 3 hours, 3 calls, 2 written statements. But the complaint was overturned, and the surgery went ahead. I didn't sit in the family lounge. I paced the hallway like a lawyer prepping for trial. When the nurse finally returned and told me everything had gone well, I nodded. Just nodded. No tears. No sigh of relief. Not yet. Later that evening, when Emrin was sleeping in recovery, I sat beside her bed, laptop open on my knees. The soft hum of the machines was almost comforting. For once, I was grateful for the sterile silence. I opened a folder titled Contingency, hidden under 3 subfolders and a code word label. Inside were screenshots, policy updates, call logs, and a scan of the insurance document Vera had altered. I didn't shake. I organized. Dates, emails, timestamps. I layered them side by side with Vera's Instagram posts. One in particular caught my eye, a quote card she'd posted weeks earlier. "Protect your peace," it read. "You don't owe anyone access to your energy." The date? Same day she blocked Emrin's surgery. I created a new document. At the top, I typed, "Public statements versus private actions." Then I wrote her name, Vera Langley. The first bullet read, Instagram, quote, "Protect your peace." March 12th. Same day insurance dispute filed on behalf of Emrin Whitmore. I didn't plan a revenge speech. I didn't imagine courtroom scenes or TV interviews, but I knew what I was doing. They taught me how to gather, how to document, how to remember, not just survive, I whispered. That was their mistake. Every woman who has been erased learns to hold on to proof. And I had enough to bury them in their own branding. The world loved her story. I was about to tell them mine. The apartment felt colder than I remembered. I had only stepped out of the hospital for an hour, just enough time to grab fresh clothes, swap out the damp towels in my bag, and breathe something other than antiseptic air. But the moment I stepped inside, it was like my body remembered how small this place really was. The light flickered as I flipped the switch, revealing a stack of unopened mail on the floor. I crouched, picked it all up, and began sifting absently through bills, coupons, a water shutoff warning that came 2 weeks early. Then I saw the mailer. Thick, glossy paper, lavender envelope, Vera's face smiling from the return label. I almost tossed it, but something stopped me. Inside was a promotional magazine, Real Women Rise. A special edition, bold, stylized, professionally printed. And there, spread across a 2-page layout, was a photo of Emrin. My Emrin. The image was cropped close, her in the hand-sewn sunflower dress I made for her 3rd birthday. The one Vera had snapped casually at the park years ago. Captioned beneath, "Because every girl deserves a strong start." Women raise women. The quote, "Raising strong women begins with strong choices. I stand for every mother who builds alone." Vera Langley. My hands went numb. They took my child's image and sold it with words I would never say. I sat down on the edge of the couch, an open in my lap, heart thudding in a strange rhythm. Not grief, not hurt, outrage, not the kind that explodes, the kind that sharpens. She hadn't just used my daughter's face. She'd rewritten our entire story, told the world it was hers. My struggle, our survival, repackaged into content. They hadn't visited Emrin, hadn't sat through the tubes, the tremors, the terror of waiting. But now, Vera's name was tied to a campaign about resilience she couldn't spell without a stylist. I picked up the ad and looked at the photo again. There was Emran, grinning wide, unaware. My stomach clenched. That's when I remembered the phone call. 2 weeks ago, a brand rep had reached out. Discreet, polite. Offered me what they called a quiet partnership. "You'll receive an emergency relief package," they'd said, in exchange for confirming we had no involvement in the insurance miscommunication. "It's more of a formality. Just a signature." A signature. Silence for sale. I'd replied without thinking. "My name isn't a discount code, and my daughter isn't your alibi." Now I knew exactly where that rejection had gone. They didn't buy my silence, so they used the image anyway. Because Vera gave it to them. Because she could. Back at the hospital, I didn't speak to anyone. I didn't mention the ad to the nurse. I didn't tell Jamie what I saw. I just walked past the machines and sat beside Emran's bed, pulling my laptop onto my knees. I opened the folder labeled Contingency. A subfolder blinked. Image assets, verified use. I dragged in a scan of the ad, saved it, then renamed the file. Exhibit A, Emran's dress. Then I created a new document. Its title read, What Empowerment Doesn't Look Like. I wrote, "You don't get to build a brand from the face you refuse to visit in a hospital bed." I sat there, eyes still locked on the screen, breath calm and steady, the clatter of nurses moving around us becoming background noise. They wanted an image? I'd show them what survival really looks like. 2 days after the ad landed in my lap, I went back to working. Quietly, from the corner of Emran's hospital room. The glow from my laptop screen was the only light in the room, aside from the monitors humming beside her. I had picked up a small consulting project from an old client. Nothing big, but enough to remind me I still had a brain beyond the chaos. I didn't need distraction, I needed control. Strategy. A former colleague I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me after seeing my name tagged in an online thread. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't offer platitudes. She just said, "If you ever want to tell your story on your terms, I have space." Quiet. Respectful, but powerful. I didn't say yes. Not yet. Not until the proof speaks for itself. That night, I got a message from Michelle, a woman from church I hadn't heard from since Emran's baptism. She included a link to an article from the local community magazine. "Thought you should see this," her message read. The headline, "The Langley Legacy, Generations of Grace." I almost laughed at the title, until I saw the photo, a family portrait, polished, filtered, posed in front of a stone fireplace. There was my mother, my father, Vera, of course, and 2 children, neither of whom were Emran. In place of my daughter was Vera's goddaughter, posed in a yellow dress eerily similar to the one I had sewn for Emran's 4th birthday party. I knew the original image. I had it printed and framed above my bed. They'd used it as a base, cropped me out, replaced Emran, smoothed the background, and slapped a banner across the top. 3 generations of resilience. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I clicked download. They didn't just rewrite me. They erased my daughter. I stared at the image for a long time, thinking about the ways silence is dressed up as dignity, about how photo edits could become false memories, how entire legacies can be rewritten in Canva and published with a press release. Later that evening, Jamie peeked in for vitals. She didn't say anything, just glanced at my screen and nodded once. She knew. That same night, while sipping lukewarm coffee from a paper cup, I received another message. This time from the internet, a link to a TikTok. The caption, "Still think she's the stable one?" I clicked it. It was Vera, months ago, from a podcast interview. She smiled into the mic and said, "My sister's always been the chaotic one. You know the type, crisis after crisis. I've had to be the stable one my whole life." The screen cut to an image of me holding Emran in the ER, my eyes hollow and body slumped. The comment section was on fire. Stable? She didn't even show up. You don't get to call someone chaotic after canceling their insurance. Wow, the audacity. I didn't share it. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I opened my evidence folder and started organizing everything. The podcast clip, the family photo, the quote in the ad, the insurance report, the financial dispute. I labeled them by date, impact, and who signed what. Then I made a new folder and titled it, Receipts, Collected. I didn't plan to scream. They expected rage. But I had learned something in the silence. You don't burn everything down to be heard. You catalog it, you wait. You build the stage they'll trip on, and they won't even know who built it. The venue wasn't grand. It was a repurposed school gymnasium with cheap curtains, folding chairs, and hand-lettered signage. But it had something that Vera's events never did. Real women in real seats, listening for something they hadn't heard before. Truth. I'd been working with a local nonprofit under a different name. I organized everything, the panel, the invite list, the venue rental, the refreshments, down to the shade of lighting for the stage. I made it look like someone else had built it, but it was mine. They always said I worked behind the scenes, I murmured to myself as I smoothed the edge of a program. Fine, I built the whole damn stage. And then I did the most unexpected thing I could. I nominated Vera as a speaker. Of course she accepted. How could she resist an event titled Unseen Women Rising from the Margins? She loved being the center of conversations she'd never lived through. The day of the summit arrived, crisp and cool. Women filled the seats slowly, laughing in their own corners of lived experience. I stayed behind the curtain, out of view, wearing black and no makeup. Vera arrived late, surrounded by handlers. She gave hugs like she'd invented them, posed for photos beside the backdrop I had hung the night before. When she stepped on stage, the room leaned in out of courtesy, not conviction. She began her speech with the usual script: resilience, boundaries, protecting your peace. She quoted herself twice. She smiled at the back wall like it had loved her first. Then came the moderator's question, the one I had slipped in personally during planning. Can you share a time you stood by a loved one when no one else did? Vera hesitated. Only for a moment. But it was enough. Camera flashes caught her blinking. Someone in the audience cleared their throat. She recovered. Vaguely. Spoke about a friend in college with anxiety. I supported her through her panic attacks, she said, placing a manicured hand to her chest. It landed flat. The moderator, God bless her, didn't stop there. What about when family needs you most? Not emotionally, but literally. That silence was different. Not dramatic. Dead. I watched Vera's jaw work. Her throat bobbed. She gave an answer about holding space and choosing when to step back for everyone's good. But the energy had shifted. In the fourth row, a woman pulled out her phone, played a video, volume just loud enough to echo. Vera's voice crackled through speakers. My sister was always chaotic. I had to be the stable one. The screen flashed. My face, holding Emran's IV hand in a hospital chair. Unfiltered. Real. Gasps. The ripple spread like water dropped on glass. I stepped onto the stage. No lights flared. No music played. I walked calmly to the second microphone and said, "Some stories are better told by the people who lived them." Vera didn't look at me. She stared straight ahead, frozen. I didn't accuse her. I didn't scream. I didn't list the evidence I'd been archiving like court testimony. Instead, I told the truth. I told them what it was like to be the daughter who was always asked to understand. The sister who was told to be the bigger person. The mother who sat in a hospital room alone while the people posting hashtags about love never showed up. I ended with this. We talk about lifting up women, supporting their strength, but real strength isn't in what you post. It's in what you show up for. Don't say you love women if you only mean the ones who look good beside you on stage. The room was still, then one clap, then another, then the flood. Vera left the stage quietly, head down, escorted not by applause, but by absence. She had wanted the spotlight. Now she would live under it. By sunrise the next morning, I had already shut off all notifications. The summit video was everywhere. A friend from the nonprofit texted me at 6:12 a.m., "You're trending." Another followed with a screenshot, my face behind a mic, one line quoted underneath, "Let's not silence the ones who bleed quietly." By 9 a.m., 2 hashtags had begun climbing across platforms: Invisible Mother and Langley Lies. I didn't post anything. I didn't need to. That's the thing about truth. It does its own work once you stop shielding it. I kept the TV off. I brewed coffee and sat beside Emran's hospital bed, watching her sleep with a calmness that hadn't touched me in weeks. She stirred briefly, eyes fluttering, then settled again. Peaceful. I opened my laptop and checked my email. At the top of the inbox was a message with no subject, no name, just a Gmail address I didn't recognize. I almost deleted it. Then curiosity won. Inside were 3 attachments and a note. I used to believe in her. I helped her build the story she sells now. But I watched her remove your name from everything you wrote. The copy, the visuals, the tagline. It wasn't a collaboration. It was theft. I'm sorry it took me this long. You built the message. She took the spotlight. I opened the first attachment. Internal meeting notes from a PR firm. Strategic planning, pitch memos, brand tone language. The second file, email correspondence between Vera and the marketing director. Subject, narrative clarification. In bold, ensure Kaelen's name is not mentioned or attributed. We're leaning full brand toward Vera's lone visionary story. The third document, signed approval, Vera Langley, digital signature, date stamped. The same day I refused the quiet partnership contract. I closed the laptop slowly, letting the weight of it settle. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt confirmed. They hadn't just dismissed me. They scrubbed me out like I was a typo in their timeline. Later that afternoon, after I stepped outside for air, a breeze kicked up and carried that old ache back in. The one that felt like being passed over in your own life. I sat on a bench, opened my phone, and searched my inbox for something I hadn't looked at in years. The old email from the bank about the girls' future fund. Something my mother had set up when Vera and I were teens. We were both listed as equal beneficiaries. I remembered that clearly. The email was still there, buried in an archived folder. And so was the withdrawal receipt. The document showed a transfer made out to Langley Digital Holdings LLC, Vera's company, via parental proxy access. No alert, no notification, no conversation, just gone. They didn't just take credit. They took resources meant to carry me through, to build her brand, to fund her empire. My hands hovered over the screen. I forwarded the documents to myself under the subject line. Final draft, proof of pattern. I didn't plan to file lawsuits. I didn't crave courtroom victories. I wanted truth to be documented, preserved, unflinching. By early evening, the articles had begun to drop. One headline read, "Empowerment or Exploitation? The Story Behind the Summit Speech." Another, "How One Mother Reclaimed Her Narrative and Sparked a Movement." I still hadn't posted a word, not even a quote, because sometimes the loudest thing you can do is not apologize. The silence was over. It was their turn to explain. I didn't cry when the article dropped. I didn't smile either. I just sat there at my kitchen table, still in pajamas, coffee gone cold, reading every word twice, then a third time. Then I opened the window and let the breeze hit my face like a reset button. The Silent Sister Behind the Summit. The headline floated above my photo. Not a staged one, just a candid someone took during my speech, eyes steady, mouth half open mid-sentence. The article was written by a name I hadn't seen in over a decade, Maya Brooks. She had been 16 when we met. Her foster mother had enrolled her in the free writing workshop I ran out of the community center before Emran was born. She was angry back then, guarded, brilliant. I had spent half a summer convincing her her voice mattered. Now, here she was, writing mine. She quoted emails, cited digital footprints, referenced my original project drafts Vera had used without credit. She laid it all out, what I'd built, what was taken, how quietly women like me were removed from our own narratives. She didn't dramatize it. She didn't beg for sympathy. She just told the truth. The strongest women are not loud, they're erased, until they write themselves back in. I read that line out loud, then again, just to hear how it sounded in the air. My inbox exploded within hours. But it wasn't noise. It was soft things. Neighbors I hadn't spoken to since the bake sale in 2018. One woman from the apartment complex who left a sticky note on my door. "You were right to speak. Proud of you." The grocer down the block tucked a small card into my shopping bag. "You did right by your girl." When I walked through my neighborhood that week, people looked me in the eye. Not with pity, not with recognition of scandal, but like I'd stepped into a space they'd always wanted to protect too. That same afternoon, after putting Emran down for a nap, I checked my voicemail. It was short. "Hi, Ms. Whitmore. I'm with a documentary series called American Edges. We're profiling voices that challenge the idea of family perfection and redefine resilience. I read the article. We'd love to hear your story in your own voice. Unedited, unscripted, just as it happened." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I sat with the idea like it was a bowl of soup. Hot, dangerous if rushed. Later that evening, while folding Emran's laundry, she wandered in from the other room. "Mom," she said casually, "can I be in it too?" "In what?" "The show. The people who want to hear your story. I want them to know you saved me." My throat tightened. "That's not how it works," I said softly. "Why not?" she asked. "Isn't it about telling the truth?" I looked at her, this little girl with too much grace in her eyes, and I realized she didn't need the world to believe in me. She already did. I called the producer back, told them yes, but not as a victim, as an author. The next day, I noticed Vera had started deleting posts, one by one. Her partnerships had gone quiet. A few of her branded hashtags stopped showing up in sponsored ads. No calls, no apologies, no awkward attempts at reconciliation. Just silence. But this time, it wasn't mine to break. Some absences start as abandonment. Others become protection. I opened the laptop, navigated to my evidence folder, labeled Proof. I clicked and dragged it into a new folder. Renamed it Archived. Then I opened a blank document and typed the title, Emma's Fund, Launch Phase. Because it was time to stop cataloging what they'd taken and start building what we needed. The war was over. Now I had to rebuild the piece, on my terms. It had been exactly 1 week since the article. 7 days since the silence cracked. Since people started looking me in the eye without blinking away. I was folding laundry when the knock came. Not a text, not a call. A knock, soft, hesitant. I opened the door, and there he was. My father, Gareth. He wore the suit he always reserved for funerals and church fundraisers, the kind that always looked too pressed to be sincere. He stood with his shoulders slightly hunched, holding something in both hands, a manila envelope and a checkbook, and a photo. An old one, me at 9 years old, in an oversized denim jacket, holding a spelling bee ribbon. I hadn't seen that picture in 20 years. He didn't ask to come in. "I saw the article," he said, voice lower than I remembered. "And the summit. Your speech." I nodded, not inviting anything. He held out the photo. "I always liked this one." I didn't touch it. He sighed, adjusting the checkbook in his other hand. "We thought silence was safer. We didn't know it'd make us complicit." I didn't soften, but I didn't lash out either. "You didn't fail because you were silent," I said. "You failed because you watched them erase me and said nothing." His eyes welled, but he blinked quickly. "This isn't a bribe. It's what we can move right now. 25,000. I know it's late." I looked down at the envelope. Not out of curiosity, but clarity. "I don't want your money," I said evenly. Help someone who's still hoping you'll show up. He didn't argue, just nodded. He handed me the picture anyway. Then I walked him to the door, not with hate, not with grace, just with a door. As he stepped into the hallway, I felt the release of something I didn't realize I was still holding. Some people beg for closure. Some are brave enough to live without it. I wasn't waiting on forgiveness. I was learning to breathe without needing permission. And then I saw her, Vera, leaning against her car like a girl in a movie who hadn't read the full script. She wasn't glowing anymore. Her skin was bare. Her posture curled slightly inward. "You were never the loser," she whispered. "You said that too late," I replied, "and only after the world agreed with me." She flinched. "Is there any path back?" she asked. I stared at her, the way you look at a road that once led home, but now only leads to detours. "There's no path. I paved a new one. You're free to walk your own." She nodded. No tears, no apology, no fight. Just a woman realizing the echo of a stage can't hold a legacy. I turned and walked inside. 2 hours later, I was standing in the lobby of a small nonprofit center, one I'd partnered with to create transitional housing for single mothers in crisis. The same center that had once given me bus tokens when I couldn't afford gas to job interviews. A new mother arrived that morning, carrying a baby wrapped in a jacket too thin for fall. I knelt down beside her and smiled at the baby, offering a donated plush bunny I'd brought from the collection bin. "You're safe here," I told her, "and if no one's told you today, you matter." She didn't cry, but her mouth trembled. She nodded, barely. That evening, Emran and I ate peanut butter sandwiches on the couch. She drew with her crayons on the back of scrap paper, tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. When she handed me the picture, I nearly lost my breath. It was the two of us standing under a bright yellow sun, holding hands. No one else. Just us. And the words scribbled in crayon across the top. "My mom is my story." I tucked her in that night, smoothing the blanket around her shoulders. "You didn't just save me, Emran," I whispered. "You reminded me who I was before they told me I wasn't enough. And what comes next? We build, without apology. The venue this time had carpet. Not marble, not linoleum. Carpet. It muffled everything. Footsteps, nerves, ego. I stood behind the curtain at the statewide Mental Health and Motherhood Forum, holding a program with my name in bold print. Not as someone's sister, not as a PR footnote, but as the keynote speaker. The audience wasn't glamorous. Women in church shoes, social workers with tired eyes, teachers, nurses, grandmothers who'd raised their daughters' children, survivors, builders. When my name was called, I didn't smile to the crowd. I just walked to the microphone and began. I wasn't always sure I was allowed to speak. Most women like me aren't taught to be loud. We're taught to be useful. The room quieted. I didn't lose everything all at once. It was quieter than that. It started when they stopped saying my name, then stopped including my daughters in the plans. Then one day I realized I had to stop waiting to be invited into the conversation. I had to write myself in. I shared how being erased isn't always loud, how sometimes the people closest to you are the ones holding the delete key. But forgiveness, I added, is not the same as reconciliation. Sometimes you heal by building without them. Applause came not like thunder, but like breath, a wave of people exhaling the truth. That night, the documentary aired. Clips of Vera's interviews played beside footage of me holding Emran in the hospital. There were no dramatic edits, no forced villains, just two stories, laid side by side. One curated, one lived. The headline across the screen read, "Influencer Empire Crumbles After Sister's Silent Rebellion." But I didn't flinch when I saw it. I didn't grin. What caught me off guard came in the mail the next morning. A letter from one of Vera's biggest sponsors. A simple note. "We should have asked more questions. Thank you for making us accountable." No money, no reoffers, just accountability. That was enough. A week later, I stood in the nonprofit community hall, a banner behind me that read, Emma's Room, Launch Day. I hadn't invited press, just the women who needed the room to exist in the first place. 3 mothers from the shelter spoke before me. Each one told a story that sounded like mine, but wasn't. Different names, different failures, same silence. When it was my turn, I didn't talk about Vera, not once. Her name no longer belonged on my tongue. The crowd stood, not because of drama, but because of decency. That was the win. In my final interview that day, someone asked me, "What would you say to the family who left you behind?" I looked straight at the camera and said, "Nothing. My life says everything now." Later that weekend, Emran and I walked past a bookstore downtown. In the window was a poster from the documentary. My face slightly turned. The tagline beneath, "The truth isn't loud, it's clear." Emran tugged at my hand. "They finally see you," she said. "No," I told her. "They see me because I stopped asking them to look." She smiled and we kept walking. We didn't look back, because when they wrote me out, they didn't know I was the one holding the pen.